How's it going, Mimsy?
Oh, it's going, Stephen. It's going.
Things are going. Things are going. It's been a lovely day of activities, and you know what I saw today? I saw the Michael Jackson movie.
Oh, how was it?
Yes, it was fascinating in some ways. Other ways, it wasn't much of a story. But his nephew Jamar, I forget the guy's name. He's very good, and of course, if you like Michael Jackson music, you're going to be enthralled. So I went as civic duty with some friends, and so I was very happy to do that. So yeah.
Civic duty, Stephen?
Yeah. I'll explain it later on off camera, but yeah. So today we have a really wonderful topic because I think one of the things I hear from people is how to get started doing genealogy, how to archive one's family members, and that sort of thing. And so I thought it'd be a great idea for you and I, because both of us engage in this activity, to talk about best practices when documenting one's elders. And
Or
so
the
I'm
many
very
practices too?
Yes, there are many practices, and so what I want to start off with is to sort of share how I got started, and like for you to talk a little bit about how you got started, and also want to make sure that those of you who are joining us now as we live stream or join us later, feel free to comment at any given time during this broadcast or afterwards, because we want to hear from you to see what you guys do, because I think there's no one way to do anything, but there are ways to make sure that the stories that you're collecting, that you're responsible for them, and that you're respectful to the people that you are documenting, recording. And so I got started documenting my elders in 1990, and it's an interesting story. So I thought back in 1990, when I was, gosh, what was I? uh, I was very young. I was like in my 20s, and I thought I was going to write a book about Black women in Toledo. And so I asked my mom and my best friends at the time, Carla and Sandy, I'm just going to interview them. So I put a tape recorder in front of them. I had a list of questions, and they were very basic questions about who they were, how they grew up, and so forth, what were their favorite interests, political interests, and so forth. It turns out that's the only time I sat down with my mother before she passed in
Mm.
1997. And so it became an oral history, talking with her, because it was just like really personal stuff, some things that I knew, but a lot of stuff I didn't know about how she grew up and so forth. So that's where I got started. And then more in earnest a few years later with talking with my grandmother and other elders. How did you get started?
Well, so let me ask you before I talk about my
Mm-hmm.
um, journey.
Mm-hmm.
So let me ask you two things. Did you
Okay.
know your mother was ill when you did the recording? Was it something that was a reason why you took her, or you wanted to do an oral history with her?
No, I didn't know she was ill at the time. I think it was 1990.
Okay.
And I was just interested. I think the impulse behind it was I was reading a lot of Black women writers in undergrad, and I was just enthralled. I got enchanted by the storytelling, both the fiction and the nonfiction. The Toni Morrison, the Toni Cable Barras, Alice Walker. I was very happy at that time. I mean, I was just learning a lot, and so I was like, I want to write a book, you know, as one does,
Yeah.
and I just interviewed her. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. And then the second, um, I mean, and that's, pretty incredible that you do have
Mm-hmm.
that interview um, as like one of the last things that you have of her recorded and telling her
Mm-hmm.
story. So,
Mm-hmm.
I can only imagine what that means to you.
Oh yeah.
But the other thing is then your mother was not that old when she passed.
No, not at all.
And so did you think at that age though, because when I got started too, I was young. I was in my 20s.
Mm-hmm.
Did
Mm-hmm.
you think that you were at that point, would you have considered your mother an elder? And at that
Mm.
point, did she seem that way because she was older than you? Like she's
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
of a different generation.
Mm-hmm.
When you're younger, people who are older than you, even if they're not that much older than you, they make
Right,
it seem like
right. Exactly.
they're elders.
That's a really good thing. That's a really good point. No, I didn't consider her an elder. I consider her my mom in a resource, somebody who had paid attention. My mother was always reading. She was an avid reader, and I watched her read all my life. And
Okay.
so to me, she was a good narrator, like a trusted narrator of her life,
Okay.
but also about the things around that she saw. So she talked, talked about religion and she talked about this other stuff. My mom died when she was 56 years old of breast cancer. And
Yeah.
so I have both the actual tape, the cassette tape, and I have several transcriptions. And what I mean by that, it was one was sort of handwritten, and then I sent one off to get a digital copy of it so I could have it transcribed again, a more accurate transcription. And it was awesome. It was just like it's one of my favorite things that I have. That'd be the thing that I save in a fire. I would
Right.
save that cassette, but also have it digitally. So that's also it's preserved that way. So yeah.
Okay. And I can see that. I can see
Hmm.
that. So do you define then, so what is your definition of elder?
My definition of elder, because I'm 60 now, right? And so some people refer to me as an elder, which is uh not hard of a stretch because people are just younger and they look at older people like past 50, I think. I think an elder is not just someone who is older, but someone who represents something in someone's life, right?
Okay.
So it could be a relative, but it could also be a neighbor. It could also be a coworker. You know what I mean?
Right. Okay.
Hmm.
All right. So, I mean, I think that's good to know because as we're talking about,
Hmm.
documenting elders, I always think elder is such a weird word for me now
I
because
agree.
as you were saying, like you're 60 now, older than your mother was at that time, even though you
Hmm.
were kind of putting her in that category.
Hmm.
Um, I think of people who are, a lot older, but I like your definition of people who, have some sort of wisdom that they
Yeah.
can pass down to you, and thinking about it in terms of um, in those terms. I
Mhm,
like the
mhm,
way that you sort of frame that. So how I got started, same thing. I was in my 20s. Same
mhm.
thing. I was going to write a book.
You're kidding me. By the way,
Oh no.
folks, we
I
didn't
mean,
plan this. We did not
no.
plan this. Yes, this is interesting. I never heard you say this before.
So I was going to write a book, and
Mhm.
I thought, well, my why for writing the book though is different from yours, but very similar
Okay.
still.
Okay.
I wanted to, it definitely is. It was more like genealogical research.
Okay.
My grandmother, my father's mother, passed away when I was really young.
Okay.
Okay, in the early '80s, or mid '80s. So I didn't
Mhm.
really have a chance to know her, and I didn't know
Okay.
her. But all of and I'm one of the youngest. My grandmother had 10 children,
Mhm,
and my
mhm.
father is the
Oh,
youngest.
he's number 10. Okay.
And sorry, my dog is over here trying to get my attention. So
Oh no.
he's
I mean,
yeah,
not oh no,
he's
that's wonderful.
he's a big dog to any of you who have never seen him. He's a really big dog, and he's completely on my lap. You can kind of see his nose. So you can see how big he
I
is.
see his nose. I see that cutie. Yes, I do.
So he's the youngest, and then like so me and my siblings were also the youngest of my cousins.
Okay.
Um, Not the exact youngest, but we're on the younger side of all of my grandmother's grandchildren.
Mhm.
So my older cousins are always talking about my grandmother. And they don't
Okay.
even call her grandmother. Grandma. They call her mama. I
Oh,
can't
okay.
do that because it's not in my. I don't think about it that way because I didn't grow up with her like that. So I
Mhm,
really
mhm.
wanted to get to know her, and I wanted to get to know. She was a part of the Great Migration. She moved from Memphis to
Mhm,
Rochester, New
mhm.
York, and I wanted to know her story.
Okay.
I also heard that she was a very quiet woman. And so I thought the
Mhm.
only way to kind of know her story is through the eyes of all of her kids, not just one of them, but I
Okay.
wanted to
Okay.
interview all of them
Mhm.
to understand her better. And I felt
Mhm.
like if I could get all of these different perspectives, these different stories, then I could really put together, like really the fuller picture of who my grandmother was. And so that's how
Mhm,
I got
mhm.
started. And same thing, I did a lot of tapes.
Okay.
Um, and a lot of the cassette tapes were it was poor quality.
Mhm, mhm.
I think I did this in like 2004, maybe.
Oh,
So
wow,
it was
okay.
like little cassette tapes too,
The mini cassettes?
mini cassettes.
Okay.
hmm They have been digitized, but still poor quality,
Mhm,
and
mhm.
transcribed. Um, some of them have been transcribed, not all of them. But
Okay.
yeah. hmm
Well, so were all 10 of the siblings alive when you started the project in 2020 2004?
Yes. But I never made it to. I never got everybody. So
Okay.
some of my aunts and uncles have passed.
Mhm.
Um, so I was not able to get. At one point, all of them were together, and I asked them questions,
Okay.
like during a family gathering when people had come
Mhm.
up from the south, and we were, everybody was together. I would ask them questions,
Mhm.
um, but there were a few people that unfortunately have passed, and I was never able to get their stories.
Mhm. When you were speaking with the ones you did have an opportunity to record, what kinds of things did you learn about your grandmother?
Man, I mean, I learned a lot.
Mm.
I feel like I learned a lot, and I learned a lot about what life was like back
Mhm.
then. What life was like, especially for her when she was in Memphis, for the
Mhm.
family. There was a lot that people could not remember
Okay.
because there's just a lot that people obviously during that generation did not share with their children. So there was
Okay.
at times a big disconnect, especially in the early years, early childhood, where people just didn't. They knew what was happening around them, sort of,
Mhm.
but
Okay.
they could not describe things in more detail that I
Mhm.
was
Mhm.
expecting at the time. And then, then it
Okay.
made sense that people just, parents made decisions and they were, they would just move with them or not move. And,
Gotcha.
they weren't included on any of those discussions.
Okay.
Um, and so, in a way, there's just this absence of knowledge.
Mhm.
But they,
Wow.
they all said very similar things about my grandmother.
Okay. Okay.
Um, for those who actually grew up with her, not everybody did. She did not raise every single one of her children the same
Mhm.
way. So, um, yeah. And then, I kind of wanted to understand that relationship and then how the identity of each person that I was talking to and how that had
Mhm.
impact on them. So then it sort of
Right.
transformed into
Okay.
not just being about my grandmother's story, but also being about their story.
Yeah. Yeah. That's
Yeah.
really awesome. And so how are you keeping these materials right now? The transcripts, the mini cassettes, and so forth.
So I still have the mini cassettes, the
Mhm.
physical cassettes. I actually still have a tape player, I believe.
Mhm.
So I have those. I have the digital files as well.
Nice.
The issue now is in the transcripts. And so they're both kept on a hard drive and then in the cloud. The issue,
Okay.
though, is what to do with that material because now it's been over 20 years
Ooh,
and
okay.
I've
Yeah.
done nothing with it. And this is something
Mhm.
my uncle reminded me of too. A few years back, he was like, "You remember when you did those oral histories and
That
you
one
did
thing you
nothing
said
with
you're gonna
it?"
do? Wow, wow, wow.
And so
Well,
I haven't
answer
done anything with it.
but answer just answer say, "Hey, I'm working on it now," or the time will
But
come
I'm
when I have
not.
an opportunity. I know, I didn't want you to lie, but
After
also
20 years.
I think it's like this. I'll have a project that I will work on in earnest, and I'm like, I'm going to finish this thing, and then life happens, and then sometimes I'll come back to it, and I'm much more enriched. I have a better sense of what I can do with it then because I've gained some knowledge or I've gained some skill set. So I know, but I
Well,
like to think that things happen in their own time, and sometimes the raw material is exactly what ends up being the thing. You know?
I mean, it has been nice, like when,
Yeah.
my one of my uncles passed, I was able to take a clip from the recording I had of him
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
share it with people. But the issue is always like what to do with all of that information. Not all of it, and especially if people are not around anymore,
Hmm.
is easy to then just share with, let's just say, their kids because then maybe they've never
Yeah.
heard it.
Yeah.
Because some of that stuff is actually very sensitive. And
Mm.
so just,
Mhm.
being like, "Oh, I've got this recording of even of my father." There's some sensitive material, people when they speak, I spoke to people for hours. So, after a while, and
Mhm.
this is something we should talk about.
Mhm,
Um,
mhm,
but I want to know what you did with your stuff, because we both did
mhm.
not write these books, these Pulitzer
No,
Prize
we did
books.
not. We
So I
did
need to
not
hear
write
what
those
you did
books.
with yours, but I do think this is
Yes,
something to keep
yes.
in mind, is that um it's yeah, what do you do with these stories? You're in these conversations with people, and sometimes they go in these, and you can't always remember everything you've told somebody, right? You've just done this oral history. If you haven't heard it yourself, play back, and a lot of people don't like to hear themselves go back, play it back.
Yes.
So even if you sent it to them, they might not listen to it.
Right.
If years do pass, then what do you do with that material when they don't have a say in, like, who hears it? What's been done with it? But before we talk about that, Stephen, I do want to know what you did with your oral histories.
Well, we're gonna wait for just a second because we have a comment
What?
that I think is really important, and it's
Okay.
related to what we're talking about. And so, this is from Reese, who says that, with this material that we've gathered, we could have a story booth at our family reunion where voices and stories could be recorded. So it's not the stuff that we're
Yes.
talking about, but it's definitely sort of enhancing the archive of family stories and lore, which I really like. I like this idea a lot. Thank you, Reese. We appreciate that. And
Yeah, that's
also
some of the
one
best
more.
time to get that
Yes.
information, is when people are gathered and they're festive, and yeah.
And Reese has seen the Michael film tomorrow. And so we will talk, Reese, about that film if you like, because I thought it was interesting. I love to hear what you have to say about it. So back to Miranda's question. And so that question is what again? I'm 60, I don't remember. Um,
Uh-huh. Your book.
so so it relates to something that I was writing down some notes today, thinking about the material that I collect for my family, in terms of the interviews. And so I interviewed one of my great aunts 4 times, like with around the pandemic, around that time, I want to say 2021 and 2022. And so at our last family reunion, I spoke with her beforehand, and as I was making commentary, I did a little presentation about the family history and so forth. And I told uh, those in attendance how important it was to do this work with my aunt, my great aunt, who was very an amazing memory. She remembers not only all of her siblings, and she has 15 siblings, right, from two different in two different families. She remembered their names, when they were
Mm.
born, when they passed. She knew their nicknames, she knew what if they smoked or not. She had all this great information. And so each time I'd come back and I ask her more questions about the family, definitely about my great grandfather Stephen, who I never met, but was told that you could hear him from way down the road because he talked loud
Mhm.
and he was,
Mhm.
gregarious and just that kind of guy. And I was like, well, that's I think I chip off the old block. So I was very happy to hear that. So what I'm getting at is that I want to share more of that story with my sister. I actually sent my sister a copy of the transcript and the voice note. I mean the
Okay.
digital copy for her. And I think what I've been trying to do over the years, I have been sending small bios of my deceased family members, my mother, my sister, my brother, to family members, to their children, to their former spouses, and I always open it with, or close it with, this is just part of the story. You can add to the story as well because everyone has a story about my mom or about my brother or about my sister. No one's taken me up on it yet, but I've been trying to like utilize what I have and turn it into something I think might be useful. We have something. We have another comment I want to show on screen. Tish Tisha Ka, Tishka Smith. I'm sorry for butchering your name. It was quite beautiful, I'm sure. I'm interviewing my 78-year-old father for a book project. Wow, can you tell us a little bit about what you're doing, how you're doing that? Tishka? Tishka? I think that's how you say it. We'd love to hear how you're you're engaging your 78-year-old father, because like Miranda mentioned earlier, some people record for hours. Some people, like with me, I did it in like maybe an hour to a little over an
Tishka.
hour spurts. Tishka, thank you so much, Tishka. So how, Tishka, if you feel like sharing, let us know how you're doing this, how you're developing this project. So
How
in
did
short, man,
you
mhm,
Yeah, go ahead.
just in short, I've been trying to use the material I have, whether it's visual or audio visual, to share with my relatives from time to time on birthdays, in at the family reunion, so that people can see people and hear them. So that this stuff it's never really inert. It might be on the shelf or might be on my computer, but I want it to be useful to my family.
Right.
Hmm.
And that, that's a good point. I have shared clips of things with people,
Yes.
not the whole
Hmm.
thing.
Hmm.
Because A, it's a lot, and then B, there's just spaces where I feel like without a conversation with people, it can be very sensitive to hear.
Yes. Hmm.
For people who have
Hmm.
never heard it, and for somebody, if it's your father and you never heard them say something.
That's
But
right. Responsible.
how do
Hmm.
you approach, so, like this, thinking about like the ethics of care,
Yes.
because that's kind of what we're talking about too. Like,
Hmm.
even though we did not produce books, we still have this material and we are still doing
Yes.
things with it.
Yes.
Um,
Hmm.
like you said, like I am still thinking about how to use that material someday. And I might write this book someday. We never know.
You
But
never know. Hmm.
like, thinking about it, how did you thinking about this, like, the care around doing oral histories. This is true for anyone. It doesn't really
Hmm.
matter if we consider them an elder or not. But how did
Hmm.
you approach, because I think it's that first step. I mean, the first thing is you have an idea, you have an intention, because I think that's really
Hmm.
important that people understand what your intentions are, that they're not just pouring their heart out to you for no reason.
Yes.
Because it is hard to give personal information in a
Absolutely.
recorded space too.
Hmm.
um
Hmm.
and so to know that somebody has like a larger intention around what it is, why it is you're asking them to
Hmm.
do an oral history. But how did you approach people,
Hmm.
to ask them if they were interested in doing an oral history with you?
I'll make it brief because Tishka has responded, and I want to make sure that we engage her. In short, the three things I think are really important for people to remember when they're talking with someone in their family or someone outside their family when they're doing any kind of interviewing. One is to develop a relationship with that person before you say a single word, meaning that if you can have lunch with them, chat them up about the project, let them know what you're going to do with the project, how the material is going to be used, that they will get a copy of that material.
Hmm.
If it's for a project where you can actually pay them, that's great. But that what you want to let them know immediately is that that copyright belongs to them, and that that's not something that you are trying to do or to trying to monetize that particular interview. You have to build that trust. So the ethics of care is really important to me. When I asked my great aunt, whether or not I could share it with someone, share it with the family member, she said, "No, go right ahead. That's fine," because it was kind of what it's for. I approached her and I
Hmm.
said, "I definitely want to know more about you and the family." And for years, when my dad left the South, he only went back once for his father. No, twice. He went back once after he got to Toledo, and then he also went back another time for his father's funeral in '64. But he never
Hmm.
returned. And so we were a bit of a mystery to them, and they were a bit of a mystery to us. And so I wanted to kind of wave away that fog and get to know them and let them get to know me as well. So, Tishka, I definitely I'm going to post this here. Yes, Tishka. And yes, he and I talk every week for about 4 to 5 hours about his life as a Chicago native, working in
5
skilled
hours.
labor, serving in the military, returning from Vietnam, and getting his bachelor's. Um,
Hmm.
and then we have I see his life as a blueprint for stories of Black men who draw on these skills and experiences to quietly support their communities whose stories go unrecognized. That's lovely. That's awesome. I'm glad you're doing that, Tishka. That's quite necessary, I think, because we talk a lot about stories that are never told or stories that are lost or experiences and whole communities go and document it sometimes. And so that's part of our ethos as the Nomadic Archivist Project. We want folks to feel empowered to tell their stories because they do matter, in so many different ways. And so, um, yeah, thank you. As you seen his life as a blueprint for Black men who use their skill sets, in these ways. And I can see it completely. Yeah. Through folks that I knew in the military.
And that's pretty impressive because I think you said your father is 78 and
Mm-hmm.
4 to 5 hours every week. That is very, very impressive.
Mm-hmm.
That like he'll sit for that long and just tell that many stories.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so you must be getting like a treasure trove of information, and probably learning your father in new ways, which is also
Mm-hmm.
really,
Mm-hmm.
like the best part about doing these oral histories of people.
Oh, and so Tishka says
He
he
loves
loves
it.
it. That's pretty awesome. Tishka, how are you documenting his stories? What's your methodology? And how did you get started asking him? I mean, how did you get yeah, how did you ask him? Or did he ask
Yeah.
you? Yeah. And so
Yeah, I mean, and documenting today is so much easier, I feel like, than it was.
mhm.
And to get like really good quality, you're right. Like your phone, all you can have your phone and then hook up a mic to it, which
Mhm.
I would always recommend having a mic, no
Okay,
matter
tell us
what
why.
device you're using, because no matter even if you're using something to record into like we're doing now,
Mhm.
that we can then clean up the audio. You could take out all the ambient noises.
Okay, okay.
My dog was barking, that can be, removed. But the mic will just take your sound. Like if you don't have a mic, then once you're using like the audio cleanups that are now available to us, it's
Mhm.
still trying to figure out what it
Mhm.
should focus on and what it should clean up. And if it
Okay.
knows there's a dedicated mic, it's really focused on like that person's, I find that person's
Mhm.
audio. Um, so I think
That's great
it's
advice.
very
Mhm.
easy to have a mic. You can have
Mhm.
obviously Bluetooth mics. You could have
Mhm.
mics that are in a headset. You can
Right.
have mics that are attached to something. You can,
Mhm.
put a mic right into the bottom of your phone. So, I would always recommend having some sort of mic, but just being able to record on your phone now too, you
Mhm.
could typically get great audio from that.
It
It's always great to have, a computer, another sound
Mhm.
system, but I mean, I feel like your phone these days, great audio, and there's so many apps
There are
too for
so many
taking.
apps.
Yeah,
There's so many apps. And so wanted to ask you this because so I used a regular tape recorder, like I'm sure you did, but it was on the
yeah.
mini disc, which is the regular size cassette. But for my great aunt, I recorded everything on Zoom and I could hear her. She was quite clear. And so I did compare the audio with the transcript and it was pretty accurate. There were
Hmm.
some names misspelled, but for the most part, they got it pretty well. So,
Well, that's also the other thing. You recorded your mother in the early 2000s, and I'm sure you
oh no, no,
recorded
no.
your great.
My mother in
Oh,
90s.
90s. I'm
Yeah.
sorry,
Mm,
90s.
mhm.
And then, I'm not sure when you recorded your great aunt, but I'm guessing it was only so many years ago. If it was
It was
in,
like 2021 and 2022, yeah,
yeah. So the
thereabouts. Mhm.
technology also has gotten so much more convenient. You could be
So much
anywhere too.
convenient.
You don't have to be physically with the person. That's the
That is
other amazing thing. You don't over Zoom, you
yes.
know, or over, like some other app. You don't have to be with the person
Mhm.
physically. They could be in another continent. You could be
And
through
with
WhatsApp.
Otter exactly. So, with these apps like Otter that we use to record meetings, people use to record meetings, that's a meeting, having a conversation with someone, and they do things like the actual transcript and, a summary, which is interesting. And so, Tishka has also responded with I call them
Oh,
using
Google
Google Voice
Voice.
for my
Mhm.
desktop and then use Voice Notes app to record. The recordings have been really clean and, of course, render a transcript. I also take I also take handwritten notes. Me too.
Yeah.
Me too, Tishka. I take a lot of notes because I don't know, I guess it's my habit as as a writer. I like thinking about my notes. So there might be something someone tells me that I want to pull apart later on and maybe consider. So I'm always taking notes. So that's good. Do you take photographs? Because I'll do screenshots with people. Well, I did that with my aunt while she was talking. And so
I think
when
when I first started out, I mean, of course, it was mostly voice.
mhm.
But now I lean always towards video. Like it just seems so much
Ah,
easier to
mhm.
do a video
Yep.
history versus an audio because you could do it audio if the video doesn't come out right.
Mhm.
But to see them and to see how they're processing and react to things,
Right.
it just adds
Absolutely.
another dimension.
I think so.
Um, and yeah, I mean, I think if people are open to it, and when I talk to people and ask them what they're interested in, some people don't, want to be recorded physically,
Mhm.
just audio, audibly, and so
Mhm.
that's also something, like how people feel, their comfort level, like what makes them feel comfortable. Is it to do it in, to be physically with them?
Mhm,
um
mhm.
like what will make them feel comfortable throughout the
Exactly.
process. And so
That
one of the things I like to
mhm.
do too is send questions to people beforehand so they have time to
Yep.
like reminisce in their own mind, to think about it, and to decide like whether or not they want to
Mhm.
engage in a certain subject matter, because there are times when people don't want to
Mhm.
open that up, or they
Mhm.
don't, even if I'm interested, they're not interested in sharing it. And so
Exactly.
being respectful of what people are and aren't
Mhm.
comfortable with is really, really important, and to
I
not
mhm.
pressure people.
I completely agree with you. Thank you for saying that. Even if so I've definitely sent questions ahead for interviews that I've done. I don't know if I've done that for my oral history. So thank you for saying that.
Hmm.
That's actually a good practice. What I do tell people though is if there's a question you don't want to answer, don't worry about it. Just say I'm not ready. I'm not, or just shake your head or what have you. Because again, the ethic of care is critical here. Critical. Um, and also we're dealing with different generations where people can feel some kind of way about telling their story, right? Again, what are you going to do with this? Who's going to hear this? And so I've done several oral history projects, and so that kind of ethic of care was really present in all three, actually four oral history transcript or oral history projects. So, but
Do
yeah,
you ever feel like, have you ever asked someone in your family um, to do an oral history and they turn you down, or they tell you they're not comfortable?
something close to that. Yes, I had an aunt who was like, "What do you want to know that for?"
Yeah.
What do you want
Okay.
to know that for? And so after a while, I was like, I'm not going to ask her to interview. I was just asking her for the birth and death dates of family members, right? And she was not having it. So,
Okay. Okay.
um, and then I said I was going to see her, and when I come to Toledo, and then she never answered the phone when I got there. So,
Yeah. Okay.
but
So
that's okay.
she
I mean, just ghosted me. Sure, I'll be at home. Stop on by. Just give me a call first, and I will not be answering that phone. So, I mean, I respect that. I think it's more funny now than it was. Then it was a little frustrating because I was really hoping to hear some things about my mom. This is my mom's sister, so but yeah.
Mhm. Okay.
Mhm.
Yeah. I don't know. I'm trying to think if I've ever dealt with a no and a hard no.
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm, mhm.
I find that more often most people that I have talked to, and I know this is not the case for everybody, have been interested in telling a story.
Mhm, mhm.
Um, but maybe don't know that they have a story to tell. I find that that's more what I come across. That
Okay.
they don't
Okay.
know, like, they always feel like they don't remember, they don't know something, and so they
Mhm,
feel like,
mhm.
"Why interview me? Like, what story do I have that would be that telling to
Right,
share?"
right.
And it's not until we actually get into the process that they start, like,
Mhm.
saying a lot of things and, like, the floodgates open. But I
Mhm,
find
mhm.
that you know, beforehand, they just feel like there's nothing, worthwhile that they have to, or they can't remember things.
Mhm,
So
mhm,
I come into that more than I come into that they just absolutely don't want to have a conversation on tape.
mhm. Well, so you're making me think of In the Telling, which is our global Black family podcast that we've been doing for 5 seasons, and we always tell people that, we send them questions in advance, and we always tell them if there's you say something that you wanna rephrase it or you want it taken out, we always give them that option because we're editing it. And so I thought about that as it relates to, or that could be transferred to an oral history with our family members. If there's something you want to stop the tape, or you want this to take this out, that's actually good too. And so I like that too. We have a comment from the wonderful Reese, and so let's show it on stream. Some folks will say yes, but then they never have the time. Yes, and this is from someone who is a genealogist. Thank you for joining us, Reese. And so, yeah, I think sometimes I've met people who shook their head and said, "Yes, I want to do this," but it wasn't for a family project; it was for other projects. So, I totally can relate to that, and
Hmm.
I want people to feel good about what they do. So if they don't, then yes, it's a good idea not to simply say no, or you can ghost me. You can ghost me. I don't care. I'll be offended for 3 minutes, but that's
I
it.
mean, I find that the not having time is a like a soft way of saying no in the
Yeah.
end. Like
Hmm.
like they're the same thing. Like they might be having cold feet or feel like they don't have a story.
Hmm.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes, really is not having the time. Um, but I also feel like there's a no in that statement.
I think you might be
And to
right.
be yeah, to be sensitive to. Um, and if somebody doesn't for real does not have the time,
Hmm.
then trying to make it something that they
Right.
can do, like go to them, make it only a
Hmm.
half an hour, instead of
Hmm.
an hour, 2 hours, whatever you had in
Right.
mind. Do it via Zoom, even if you're in the same town. Maybe it's easier for them to get on that way.
Hmm.
If it's an oral history, you've asked them for a video history, but then they're going to worry about how they look. So then just make it audio.
Right.
You know, Definitely different ways to kind of get around that, or
Hmm.
to help
Hmm.
someone sort of get to the place where they feel like they can do it.
Right. Right.
Because I do still feel like that not having the time is also a way of them just kind of backpedaling and slowing it down, as they
See
try to
that.
process what this could be. But
Right.
trying to make it as convenient for people as possible, and
Hmm.
realizing that it's their time, it's their
Right.
memories, it's
Hmm.
they're being very generous in sharing, because people don't have to
Hmm.
share a story, even if it relates to you, I guess. It's
Yeah.
like your mother you're trying to get a story from, or your father or somebody,
Hmm.
it's still theirs. It's theirs.
It's
And
the
so,
it's still theirs, but there are two things I want to mention very briefly. I put Everybody Needs a Witness. This is a project called the In the Life 2.0 by our colleague and friend and brother and comrade Christopher Stalling, who started an oral history where he was inspired by the In the Life Archive project at the Schomburg Center and was really looking for more first person narratives around their life that would express their everyday lives, that express joy. He didn't really focus on trauma. These are Black LGBTQ people. And so sometimes we get those stories and we all always get the trauma. We don't get a lot of maybe the more fuller picture of what their life is like. And so he does a lot of oral histories and he takes a lot of care. Sometimes he cooks for people. Sometimes the interviews are short,
right.
sometimes they're longer, and I just wanted to give him a shout out because I think he's up to 80 interviews right now or thereabouts, and he's been doing this tirelessly and largely unfunded, because he wanted to contribute to the community in that way. And he talks about the ins and outs of, like, one, talking with people and getting and recognizing that they might not be ready to have that conversation about their lives, even though they had it off, what do you call it, off the record, right? And
Yeah.
so The other thing I want to mention is that when that when you take notes, um, like Tishka does, what I love is that you're also looking at, if you can mention the body language, you can mention that they emphasize certain kinds of things that may not come across in the transcription. They might come across in the video, of course, because that person's doing it. But if you're just doing
Yeah.
audio, notice things about um, you know, their pauses, and the people that they've talked about that bring them a lot of joy or maybe not so much joy. There's some really great ways to build out this thing that's just not a dry one-to-one word and you're just getting words. It's like, no, this is, like you said, this is someone's time, and being respectful of their time and taking it seriously. No one has to do an oral history with anyone. And so want it to be a good experience overall for them.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that idea of like cooking. If I cooked, I would do that too. Christopher's a cook and he
He
loves
is a cook.
cooking.
He's very good at it. Yes, he's very, very good. Um, and so there was something I thought was interesting about the oral history, and it's slightly to the left of this, and that I tried to sit down with my father several times during his life. He passed in 2022. He's 84 years old. What I've been able to sort of put together is stories he's told me over time, right? Since I was a kid. And then he would tell me things and I write them down so I wouldn't forget them. I have a journal. And I was like, this is really pivotal. This is my father deciding to come to Toledo, who was actually on his on route to Compton, California, where a lot of our Louisiana family ended up migrating to. He was on his way, but he met my mom, got married, and stayed in Toledo. And hearing the story from his mouth has always been really important to me. He told me a story once. I live in Harlem and I'm walking down the street and it's all loud. I'm talking to my dad, and he begins to talk about my mother, how he met my mother. It's not the TV show.
Hmm.
And he goes, I went to this party and I was with this other girl and I saw your mom and it was all over. And I almost stopped. I was like, I gotta just find some paper and write it down because I didn't want to forget. I had the emotion, but I knew that I wanted to write it down. And that never
Yeah.
heard my father talk about my mom in any kind of romantic way. So that was really beautiful to me. So I wouldn't call it a reconstructed oral history. I would say that there were stories my father told me, you know, but it is not double, but it is in lieu of that oral history that I never got, that he never wanted to commit to because he felt like it was a it wasn't even catch me later. It was just no.
Yeah.
Just like I don't feel like talking. So, but I was so fortunate my dad would say things to me and that I have a decent memory for these things because I was hungry for those stories. I
Right.
looking back on them. So yeah.
What advice do you think would you give for people who are trying to do oral histories with people
Hmm, hmm.
who are having memory issues, right?
Ooh. Hmm.
Who may be already diagnosed or
Hmm,
in the
hmm.
throes of like Alzheimer's or something like that. Like
Hmm.
um what advice do you think, or what things would you suggest that people think about when engaging or thinking about doing oral history with people who have some memory challenges?
What I think that's a great thing. I'm glad you brought that up for a number of reasons because I think that the assumption is that when we do oral histories with someone who's not having or doesn't have memory issues in that extreme way, that they are misremembering. We assume that they're telling us the truth, right?
Right.
Um, and with you, when you were interviewing your uncles and aunts about your grandmother, they had different versions of the
Yes,
story. They had
it's their versions of the truth.
Right. And so when it comes to someone who's having memory issues, I'm actually talking with someone right now about a book project I'm doing and what they remember about this particular thing about their father, right? I have three people who are part of this story. So I feel confident or relatively confident that I'll find that story. But I think I take a lot of care when I'm listening to people There's a friend of mine who has short-term memory issues, and so to be kind, be gentle. If someone's agreed to do this with you, they might even forget why they're talking to you, why they're telling you this. And so
Yeah.
being able to pivot, being able to be flexible, but making sure that there is concern in your voice and that you are concerned. And if they want to stop, you stop.
Yeah.
Because they have the short-term memory. So I think an ethic of care around is really putting that person first. The story is, I mean, of course we want the story and we want to share with family members and but the most important thing is, and you said it earlier, is helping that person be comfortable, right? That's the first and foremost thing. So you don't want to be extractive. You don't want to push, when someone might be upset about something and you give them a moment to breathe and relax and maybe terminate the interview at that point. But I think really working with someone who has short-term memories or someone who might have dementia, the special challenges are around care. They can be around care. You don't want to be frustrated with them. They're already frustrated, in some cases. So I would just be really patient and kind, you know.
Yeah, and I think a lot of that is too allowing them to tell their story the way they're gonna tell it.
Absolutely.
Sometimes it can feel, like there could be a ramble or that things don't
Mhm,
actually
mhm.
connect, or the
Right.
question you've asked is not what they're answering.
Mhm.
Um, and for you, you might have an intention of like, I'm trying to tell this story, but they're not giving it to
Right.
me. They know
Mhm.
it, but they're not giving it to me. And so there might be a little frustration in that. And I think,
Mhm.
and that's understandable, but it's still their story, the way that they're telling it. And you
Absolutely.
might not be able
Mhm.
to get the information that you're looking for, even if you go back on future sessions,
Mhm.
that it
Mhm.
might just not be,
Available
something.
to you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it might just not be available. And
Mhm.
so to kind of respect that too, to respect that
Oh,
it is
yes.
what it is. At the end of the day, it is what it is.
Mhm.
And to push, especially when somebody's being recorded,
Mhm.
um, to keep going, that could create more frustration on their
Yes.
part, like you said. Um, and then that's just not fun for anybody.
No.
Um,
Mhm.
right. And so, yes, it is, and I do understand like the frustration when you're you're really looking to answer a question
Mhm.
that just cannot be answered. And so sometimes, sometimes it can though, and it just depends with people with
Mhm.
memory challenges, that it could be that the session, that time, that day is not the right day and you might try again. But how
Mhm.
many
Mhm.
times you try and it's still not happening, that's a wake up call that you might just not get that answer.
And
Um,
like you said earlier, that's okay too. Like you're
that's
not a
okay.
lawyer. You need to tell me the truth. I can't tell you the truth. I'm having memory issues, and you want to be, like I said, very, very respectful of that. In a time where a lot of us, some of our elders are having memory issues. Um, Again, it's incumbent upon us to be as gentle and as kind to them as possible. Tishka
Yeah.
has just put something there, and let's put it on the stream. For those of us engaged in the work, what are some self care strategies we can engage in to better support our elders? Wow, I have a couple, Tishka. And the first one is before doing the interview, conducting the interview, set an intention for yourself that includes them. So that self-care is both for you and for them. And make sure you're hydrated, you're fed, you're not going to be hungry, there's not a lot of noise, you've had a good night's sleep. There's a lot of pre stuff I think that can be done when it comes to working with our elders because you've known your dad all your life, right? And so there may be things in his personality that rub you the wrong way, and you don't want to scrunch up your face. You want to just be prepared. You're like, my dad likes to go on tangents, and I'm going to go with those tangents and then gently ask him back over to the road that we are walking on together. So a lot of pre stuff, and also knowing that person and knowing that there might be special things you need to do to um to make it an enjoyable experience for both of you. So that's what I would say. What would you say, Mims?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things we said earlier too, making sure the environment is comfortable for them,
Mhm.
but also during the interview, checking in to see how they're feeling.
Mm.
Is it working
Mhm.
out? You know, I would just at various times check in. And
Mhm,
just,
mhm.
I feel like you're right about ourselves. Like putting ourselves in check.
Mhm.
I feel like is a really big piece to it. There's just a lot, even if we don't know that person, but you're right, like
Right.
having a good night's sleep and like being present with them, making
Mhm.
sure um that is all, like we are straight, like we have ourselves together and we're ready
Right.
for this.
Mhm.
um I think is key, because I think that energy and that relaxation and that feeling of
Mhm.
um, that we're kind of generating, then
Mhm.
it translates. So I think
Mhm.
that's a good point.
Mhm.
Um, that's a good point. But yeah, it definitely environment, definitely check-ins. And if it's
Yes.
not
Oh,
working
yeah.
that day, it's not working. I would just let it go. It's
Exactly.
better to just reschedule, do it at a different time.
Mhm.
Um, yeah.
You also have
And
environment, what you said earlier about environment, like, I would also add build time around it, so it's not just a strict 60 minutes. Like, make it, in your mind, an hour and a half, because there might be some prep that needs to happen, there might be an interruption, and so, sometimes, what I try to do is to make sure, with anything actually, that I'm them trying to see what the obstacles could be and plan for those. So that one, I mean, you can't plan for everything, but you can get to a place early. You can do things on your part so that you're not frustrated. So building, I
yeah,
always try to get someplace early and I have a book or I have my notes and I'm very self entertaining. So that helps me not be frustrated because I'm late somewhere or because I'm caught off guard, because I like to read what the agenda is before I get to somewhere place as well. So self prep, self care, and self care means care for others as well. So it's a little, it's, to me, it's one thing. So yeah, and
yeah. But I like that question.
me
I
too.
think and I also think if you early prep too, is helpful. So if they're open to it, talking beforehand, and this could be like a week or two
Yes. Oh
beforehand,
yeah.
and just
That's
getting
a good
people
point.
like aware of what the process is. I find
Mm-hmm.
that I find like a lot of the elders I know are very short. It's like you tell them and they're like, I'm fine. And it's just like, okay, well,
Like, well, we're going to be
okay.
sitting here for half an hour, maybe an hour.
Yeah, it's like, okay, just yeah, like, oh, questions are fine, okay. Um,
Mhm.
but the more and I used to be like, oh, okay, fine. But now I'm a little bit more like, let me keep checking in
I like
ahead
that
of
check-in
time
part. Yep. Hmm.
to, just making sure that they're comfortable, or, reiterating something, I think is helpful for a lot of people.
Hmm.
Um, yeah. So whether you're an elder or not, but
Hmm.
it's definitely, I would definitely encourage people to do it. It's worth doing. I think,
Hmm.
somebody mentioned this earlier that, and I feel the same way with I didn't get to interview every single aunt and uncle that I wanted to. And, now they're gone. And so,
Hmm. Excuse me.
it's not something to kind of take for granted
Right.
that, one day you'll be able to do it. Even if you're not structured, you haven't had any questions, but you're sitting across the table from somebody
Hmm.
and, they're telling you a story. You might ask them, can I record it? Just, get your phone out
Oh, that's a good point.
and have a
Yeah.
conversation with them. And
Hmm.
maybe some of those kind of just spur of the moment conversations, could actually get you something like that you could use,
Hmm. Hmm.
either just to remember them at some point, or, think back on that situation, remember yourself in that situation.
Hmm. Yep.
Um, but you don't always have to wait for it to be some sort of structured oral history time.
Oh, that's a good
It
point.
can
Yes.
be, yeah, it can be a little bit more organic than that as well, if the
Hmm.
person that you're with is open to it. And so I think it's more important always, there's all the best practice. And I said, have a mic, but the most important thing is getting the story or getting their voice,
Mhm, mhm,
especially if it's a loved one that you're doing, to be able to have that,
mhm.
um, you know, is it's irreplaceable. And so to me, it's always just the moment is if you're in the moment at that point, and that's the right moment, regardless of what technology you have,
It's
that's the
always
right
yep,
moment to do it
right.
if everyone is open to it.
So for those of you who want to get started, very briefly, create a list of the people you want to talk to and go to the eldest of the eldest's to see if they'd be interested in talking to you. Because again, time really isn't on our side. So there's that.
And I'd
And
also
then
say make sure you have a why. Like people want to know why you want to know it could just be
yes.
that you want to know, you haven't heard these and you want it to be recorded. But there's a difference between like wanting to hear somebody's story and not recording it just so and then the
Hmm,
recording
hmm.
factor. So like why the recording factor? Like
Right.
why is that important? I think that's important to be
Oh
able
yeah.
to communicate to somebody. So what
Hmm.
is your why too? Make sure that you might not like me. You might not you may never write that book. But
Hmm.
I had a specific purpose of why I was doing it.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um and so I think that makes a big difference.
Oh, it
It made a
does.
big difference to me because it also meant, how intentional, because I did it over a couple of years. So this was a
Mm-hmm.
longer engaged process. And then, having them digitized and
Hmm.
transcribed. I mean, all these things took a long time. So it was also my commitment to it. And I think that
Right.
your commitment to it should be known by the other person, that you actually
Absolutely.
do. Yeah, you have some sort of reasoning, some sort
Hmm.
of passion behind what you're doing.
Hmm.
It could open the doors to being able to have more generous conversations with people if they understand what your why is.
I agree. I completely agree. Know your why. Know your why. And I think we're coming up on time, Miranda. I think
We are.
it's
How did an hour go by so quickly?
because it's a great it was a good conversation. Thank
It's a
you,
good conversation.
Tishka. Thank you, Reese, and all of you who came today, and those of you in the future who might be listening to this. We appreciate it, and just thank you, and we'll
And if
see
you're
you.
interested in hearing any
Mhm.
of their conversations, for In the Telling is our podcast. So we talk to people about their family stories,
Mhm.
any family story that they're interested in sharing. As Steven said, we're in our fifth season. So we still have a few more episodes to go. We just published one about a week ago, I guess.
I
But
think
we
so.
those come out like once a month. We can't
Mhm.
tell you when they come out because that is a little more organic. But they come out
Mhm.
about once a month. But if you're interested
Mhm.
in hearing some of those podcasts, you can get them wherever you get podcasts, or you can get them here you can watch them here at our YouTube channel.
Yes.
We only have two more. So Stephen and I do the NAP Kickback every other week.
Mhm.
We only have two more kickbacks, I think, coming up. We have one
Mhm.
in May and then one in June.
Mhm.
So when we know those dates, I think we do, but in about 2 weeks will be the May one.
Mhm.
Um, we'll publish those beforehand so people will
Mhm.
know. But after that, we'll be taking a summer break. And then we'll
Mhm.
come back in the fall and do it every other week. So we hope that people will come and join in the conversation, share your
Mhm.
experiences. This
Please.
is a space that we're
Mhm.
hoping, will be a shared space of knowledge and inspiration and questions. Um, so yeah, just a community space that we'd love to see everybody come to in the future if you're watching this.
Please. Mhm.
Um, and definitely share any comments you have as well. We'd love to see
We
what's
would
happening in
love to
your
see.
world with oral histories.
Yes.
But until then, Stephen,
We are the Nomadic Archivist Project, Miranda Mims and Stephen G. Full with no period behind the G. And we'll see you in May.
in May. All right. Take care, everyone.